I will never forget the day when my hands started to shake from anger. A mahout, his face twisted with rage, raised a sharp metal hook and struck it hard against the head of a young elephant. Blood burst from the wound, and the air was filled with the animal's piercing cry, so human that something inside me broke. I rushed forward, not thinking about the consequences, only wanting to stop the horror. What happened next changed my life forever, and the lives of thousands of elephants across Asia. My name is Sangduan Shiler, but everyone knows me as Lek, which means little in Thai. It's an irony of fate, a little woman who became the voice of the biggest land animals on Earth. My story began far from tourist spots and famous parks, in a tiny mountain village in northern Thailand. I was born into a family of traditional healers. My childhood was filled with the smell of medicinal herbs and stories about how people and nature could live together in peace. But the moment that shaped my path was the arrival of an elephant named Tongkam. My grandfather, a respected healer, once received her as a gift from a grateful patient. Tongkam was a gentle giant. Every morning I woke up at sunrise to help my grandfather take care of her. I brought her fresh fruit and leaves, cleaned her skin with a wet cloth, and spent hours just watching how she moved, ate, and interacted with other animals. Sometimes I felt like I understood the language of her body better than I understood the words of kids my age. Elephants have souls as old as these mountains, my grandfather used to say as we sat on our porch, watching Tongkam slowly walk among the trees in the evening light. They remember what we have long forgotten. I believed every word. In Tongkam's eyes, I saw wisdom, patience, and a kind of deep sadness. I often hugged her huge leg, pressing my cheek to her wrinkled skin, whispering secrets I couldn't tell anyone else. My childhood ended when I turned 16. By then, I already knew I wanted to see more of the world than just our village. I wanted to study, to learn new things, to see new places. I was especially drawn to the English language, a key to talking with the outside world. I saved every coin I could, doing small jobs wherever possible, and finally saved enough for my dream to go to the big city and take English classes. Saying goodbye to Tongkam was painful. I hugged her trunk like I had done hundreds of times before, but this time with tears in my eyes. "I'll come back," I promised, even though I wasn't sure I could keep that promise. The city overwhelmed me. Bright lights, constant noise, crowds of people rushing somewhere. I felt lost, but the dream of learning gave me strength. I studied with such passion that my teachers often used me as an example for other students. English words, so awkward on my tongue at first, slowly became more natural, opening new doors for me. One of those doors led to a job as a tour guide for foreign visitors. It was a perfect way to practice English and earn money at the same time. I told travelers about the beauty of our culture, the old temples, the friendly people, and of course about the elephants, the pride of Thailand, our living national treasures. At first I repeated all the usual tourist lines we were taught. Elephants are hard-working animals. They help people and entertain visitors. But the more I traveled across the country, the more I saw things that didn't fit that perfect, glossy image. At a logging site, I saw elephants working until they collapsed. Their backs were covered in scars from their handlers. Some were limping, but still forced to drag huge logs through rough jungle paths. Their footpads were cracked and filled with bloody mud, and their eyes were empty. So different from what I'd seen in Tongkam. "This is normal," one of my co-workers said when he saw how shocked I was. "Elephants are made for work. They're strong." But I knew that wasn't true. Elephants weren't made to pull logs or carry tourists 12 hours a day. They were meant to roam freely through forests, care for their families, raise their babies, and speak their rich language, one that we humans never even tried to understand. My resolve grew stronger when I got a job at a tourist elephant camp that offered elephant shows and rides. I hoped the elephants there would live better lives. But what I saw behind the scenes forever changed how I saw the tourism industry. On the very first day, I saw how they trained a young elephant for the show. They tied him from all four sides so tightly that he couldn't even move. And then it began, the Fajin, an ancient ritual meant to break the spirit and make the elephant obey humans. The mahouts kept hitting him with sticks that had sharp hooks, aiming for the most sensitive spots: his ears, trunk, and feet. The baby elephant screamed so loudly that my hair stood on end, but no one even flinched. For them, it was just a routine. "That's how it's done," one of the senior mahouts told me when he saw the horror on my face. "Otherwise, they won't listen, and a disobedient elephant is dangerous." I stood there frozen, unable to move or say a single word. That night, I couldn't eat or sleep. I kept seeing the scared look in the baby elephant's eyes, not understanding why he was being hurt, and the cold faces of the people around who thought it was normal. Days passed, and I kept learning more and more terrible stories. One elephant at the camp was blind. The mahout had hit him in the eyes when he refused to walk along a narrow wooden path with tourists on his back. Another one limped on his front leg. It had been broken during logging work and healed badly. A third one kept swaying from side to side, a sign of deep mental trauma that elephants develop in captivity. I started secretly bringing them fruit, gently touching them between shows, singing quiet songs I used to sing to Tomcom. Some of the workers laughed at me. "Look at this silly village girl. She thinks the elephants understand her." But I knew they did. Not the words, but the tone, the feeling, the energy. And slowly, day by day, even the most scared elephants began to reach their trunks toward me when I passed by. Then came the day that split my life into before and after. A new baby elephant arrived at the camp. Very young, just recently taken from his mother. He was so scared that he refused to come out of the transport cage. The head mahout, a heavy man with a face always red from alcohol, lost his patience. He grabbed an ankus, the metal hook used to control elephants, from one of the assistants and hit the baby elephant on the head. Blood splattered onto the dusty ground, and the animal's scream was so sharp that even the experienced workers flinched. I ran forward without thinking. My body moved on its own, as if someone unseen was guiding me. "Stop!" I shouted, standing between the mahout and the baby. "You'll kill him!" The man looked at me like I was an insect he was about to crush. "Get out of the way, girl. This isn't your business." "It is." I didn't recognize my own voice, suddenly deep and firm. "This is a living being that feels pain. What would you do if someone treated your child like that?" A crowd started to gather around us. Camp workers, tourists who had happened to be nearby. The mahout clenched his fists, his face turning even redder. "You think you know better how to handle elephants? You, some village girl?" "Yes." I looked him straight in the eyes without looking away. "I do." He raised his hand, not the hook, just his hand, and I braced myself for the hit. But suddenly something unexpected happened. The wounded baby elephant, still shaking with fear, took a step forward and wrapped his small trunk around my shoulders, as if trying to protect me. It was so surprising that the mahout froze for a moment. Someone in the crowd gasped. I heard camera shutters clicking. Of course, the tourist wouldn't miss a moment like that. The baby elephant pressed closer to me, leaving a bloody mark on my shirt. "Do you see?" I looked around at the people watching. "He's not aggressive. He's just scared. He doesn't need to be beaten. He needs care and respect." The camp manager, worried that things were getting out of control, rushed over. He pulled the mahout aside and told me to take care of the elephant. "Since you're so smart, treat him yourself. But in a week, he'd better be ready for shows, or you're out." I stayed with that baby elephant all 7 days, barely leaving his side. I cleaned his wound, applied herbs my grandfather had taught me to use, sang lullabies, massaged the muscles that had gone numb from standing in the cage too long. At night, I slept next to him on the straw, and he would wrap his trunk around me as if afraid I'd disappear if he let go. I named him Navi. Hope. And he really became my hope, my awakening to what would become the mission of my life. On the 7th day, the manager came to check on our progress. The baby elephant could already walk without obvious pain, and the wound on his head had begun to heal. "Good," the boss nodded. "Tomorrow we'll start training him for the show." "No," I shook my head. "He's still too young, and I won't let anyone hurt him again." The manager laughed. "You won't let? Who do you think you are? You have no rights, no money, no power. You're nothing." In that moment, something inside me broke. Not like the spirit of a baby elephant breaks during the Fajan, but like a wall collapsing, revealing a new path. I suddenly realized that I could no longer be part of this system of cruelty. "You're right," I said. "I don't have any of those things. Not yet, but I will find a way to change the lives of these animals. All animals." I quit that same day, and I promised myself that I wouldn't stop until I created a place where elephants could live with dignity, without fear or pain. Of course, that path wasn't easy. Who would believe in the dream of a poor girl from a mountain village? I had no money, no connections, no knowledge of how to start a sanctuary, but I had determination and a deep belief that I was doing what I was meant to do. I started small, collecting information about elephants in captivity all over Thailand. I wrote down their stories, took photos of their wounds and scars, talked to mahouts, trying to understand their thinking and motives. Many laughed at me, some threatened me, but there were also those who truly wanted to help. They just didn't know how. I met foreign volunteers and told them about the elephant situation in my broken English. I showed them the pictures and took them to places where tourists were never taken. Slowly, my support network began to grow. The first elephant I rescued was an old female named May. Her owner could no longer use her for work because of her arthritis, and she was left to starve, tied to a tree with no food or water. I bought her with all my savings and the last bit of money I had earned from giving tours. But then came a new problem. Where could I keep her? I couldn't bring an elephant to my small rented room in the city, so I had to return to my home village and ask my family for help. My father was shocked when I showed up at the door with a week-old elephant barely able to move her legs. "Have you lost your mind, Lek?" he said, shaking his head. "What are you going to do with her?" "I'll help her feel what it's like to live without pain, at least for the last years of her life," I answered. The family reluctantly agreed to help. We gave May a small piece of land behind the village, where she could move freely. Every day I brought her fresh fruit and branches, massaged her aching joints, and talked to her. At first, the villagers thought I was crazy, but slowly they got used to the sight of an elephant who didn't work, but simply lived. Then the first tourists started to arrive. The same foreigners I had once guided through temples and markets. They wanted to see the happy elephant their friends had told them about. They paid a small fee just to be near May, to feed her, to gently touch her. No tricks, no rides, just connection. This could be a new way for local people with elephants to earn money, I told my father. Instead of working them to exhaustion, they could just let people be with them in a natural setting. The idea was revolutionary for that place and time, but it started to work. Slowly, more elephants arrived. I bought them from owners who could no longer care for them or didn't want to. They came to me sick, starving, and injured. But little by little, with love and care, they started to come back to life. By 2003, my dream of a real sanctuary had become a reality. With support from international organizations and private donors, I was able to buy a large piece of land in the beautiful Mae Tang Valley near Chiang Mai. That's how Elephant Nature Park was born, a place where elephants could simply be elephants. The philosophy of the park was completely different from everything the Thai tourism industry offered. No shows, no tricks, no rides. Visitors came to watch the elephants live naturally, feed them, and sometimes bathe with them in the river, but always on the animals' terms. Of course, not everyone welcomed the change. The elephant mafia, groups of people whose business depended on exploiting elephants, saw me as a threat. I received anonymous threats. Once someone even tried to burn down my house, but I didn't give up. Every elephant I saved, every spark of life I saw return to their eyes, gave me strength to keep going. One of the most emotional moments for me was rescuing a blind elephant named Jokia. Her story was especially heartbreaking. After many years of working in logging, she collapsed from exhaustion and refused to keep pulling logs. Her mahout beat her with a stick directly in the eyes, blinding her on purpose. When I first saw Jokia, what struck me most was how she always kept her head down, as if she was ashamed of her blindness. Jokia's adjustment to life in the park was a long process. She was afraid of every sound, every touch. I spent hours with her, quietly singing and speaking softly so she could get used to my presence. Slowly, she began to let me touch her. Then she allowed me to guide her on walks, holding her ear so she could feel the direction. And then, a miracle happened. We rescued another female elephant named May Perm. She was also older and had health issues, but her eyesight was perfect. The two bonded immediately. May Perm became Jokia's eyes, leading her to the best feeding spots, warning her about dangers, and helping her walk down to the river. And Jokia, in return, would often wrap her trunk around her friend and share the tastiest fruits I brought them. Watching their friendship, I often thought about how much we humans could learn from these majestic animals. Compassion, care, and selfless help. I felt a special connection with orphan baby elephants brought to the park. Their trauma was similar to mine. I too lost my mother at a young age and knew how hard it is to grow up without a mother's love. I often spent nights with them, singing lullabies I remembered from childhood, massaging their small bodies to help them relax and fall asleep. One day, a baby elephant arrived who was given the name Hope. His mother had been killed by poachers, and he himself had been shot, the bullet wound somehow not fatal. When Hope arrived at the park, he was so stressed that he refused to eat or drink. The veterinarians feared he wouldn't survive. Baby elephants are deeply attached to their mothers and often die of grief when they're separated too young. I stayed with Hope for 3 full days and nights, never leaving his side. I gave him water from a bottle, rubbed his body to improve blood flow, and spoke to him constantly so he wouldn't feel alone. On the 3rd night, when I was nearly exhausted from lack of sleep, I began to sing an old Thai lullaby, one I had once sung to Tongkam. The melody was simple, and the lyrics were about a mother who always comes back to her child, no matter how far she goes. And then, a miracle happened. Hope, who had been lying still with his eyes closed, barely reacting to the world, suddenly moved. He slowly lifted his head, looked at me with his big, tear-filled eyes, and reached his trunk toward my face. I kept singing, feeling his small trunk gently exploring my features, like a blind person reading a book by touch. Then he made a soft trumpet sound, the first sound in 3 days, and rested his head on my lap. I sang and cried at the same time, stroking his rough skin, feeling his breathing become slower and deeper. When I finished the song, Hope was asleep, curled up at my feet like a giant baby. And in the morning, he walked over to the feeding station and ate for the first time. That moment was one of those that confirmed I was on the right path, that all the struggles, the obstacles, the threats, they were worth it, just to see life return to the eyes of a creature who had lost all hope. As time went on, Elephant Nature Park grew and developed. We rescued more and more elephants, and each brought their own story, their own personality, their own needs. There were elephants with broken legs from landmine explosions in border areas, elephants with deep emotional wounds from decades in circuses, elephants who had been used for begging on city streets. I remember every one of them by name. I know the story behind every scar on their bodies, and the greatest reward for me is to see them form new families, to watch rescued females adopt orphan babies, to see them play freely in the river without fear of whips or shouting. Over time, our work expanded beyond the park. I founded the Save Elephant Foundation, which helped launch new projects across Southeast Asia. We help local communities develop ethical ways to interact with elephants, train former mahouts in new skills, and run the Saddle Off campaign, which encourages tourism companies to stop offering elephant rides. One day during a flood in Bangkok, I couldn't turn away from the hundreds of stray dogs trapped in the flooded streets. We organized a rescue mission, and many of those animals found a new home at our park. Today, we care for more than 700 dogs and 1,600 cats, along with buffaloes, horses, and other rescued animals. People often ask me what the secret is to my approach with elephants, why they trust me, why they listen without a whip or a hook. I always say there is no secret, only love, respect, and the understanding that these beings feel just as deeply as we do. I remember an event that surprised even the most experienced staff at the park. We had just rescued an old female elephant who had spent over 40 years in harsh conditions. She was scared, aggressive, and refused to let anyone near her. She would trumpet loudly and threaten anyone who tried to approach. "She'll never get used to us. one of the veterinarians said, shaking his head. It's too late. The trauma is too deep. But I couldn't accept that. I believed that deep inside her broken soul, the real elephant still lived, one that could trust and love again. For 3 days, I simply sat nearby without approaching her. I just let her get used to my presence. I read books out loud, sang soft songs, told stories about other rescued elephants. Sometimes I noticed her secretly glancing at me, but whenever our eyes met, she would turn away as if pretending not to see me. On the 4th day, I brought a basket of fresh fruit, bananas, pineapples, mangoes, the sweetest I could find. I placed the basket on the ground and gently pushed it toward her. She looked at the offering with suspicion, but the smell was too tempting. She took a few hesitant steps forward, then stopped as if expecting a trick. I didn't move. Finally, she reached out with her trunk and took a banana. I nearly cried from happiness. A week later, I was able to sit close enough for her to smell me. I always wore the same light jasmine-scented perfume so she could recognize me easily. I noticed that she would often sniff the air when I arrived, as if checking if it was really me. A month passed before something happened that I no longer dared to hope for. That day I was sitting on a rock by the river, watching the other elephants bathe. Suddenly I felt a touch, soft as a breeze. I turned around and saw her, the old elephant, standing right behind me. Her trunk was reaching out, gently touching my shoulder with a tenderness I never expected from such a huge creature. Our eyes met, and in her gaze I saw what I had been hoping for all along. Recognition, trust, maybe even gratitude. I slowly stood up, afraid to break the moment. She didn't move away. Instead, she stepped closer and wrapped her trunk around my waist, so gently as if I were made of glass. Then she bent her legs and lowered herself to the ground, as if offering me a ride. "She wants you to sit on her back," whispered a stunned caretaker watching from a distance. I knew how big this moment was. Elephants that have suffered abuse from mahouts usually hate being ridden. It brings back their worst memories. But she was offering it herself, the highest form of trust she could give. I carefully climbed onto her back. No saddle, no ropes, no guiding stick. She slowly stood up and walked toward the river where the other elephants were splashing in the cool water. When we reached the water, she filled her trunk and raised it high above her head. For a second, I panicked. Was she going to spray me? But instead, she poured the water on her own shoulders, washing away the dust. Then she did it again and again, creating a refreshing shower for both of us. The park workers stood on the bank with their mouths open. No one had expected such a breakthrough, especially from an elephant they had already labeled as too traumatized. That day I was reminded again that no creature is too broken to heal, if approached with enough love and patience. Over the years, our park became known not just in Thailand, but all over the world. Time magazine included me in their list of Asian heroes, calling me the Elephant Woman of Thailand. I received awards and recognition, but the greatest reward was always seeing animals who had lost all hope learn to enjoy life again. Tourists visiting our park often ask if I have a special trick for connecting with elephants. I always tell them the only trick is honest love and respect. When you see an elephant not as a tool for work or a tourist attraction, but as a feeling being with its own personality, real communication begins. One day, a group of tourists arrived at the park, including an older man with a stern face. Later, I learned he was a former elephant mahout who had worked in the profession for more than 30 years. He watched as I interacted with one of our recently rescued elephants, a large male who had been used for heavy labor in the jungle. "What do you give them?" the man asked suspiciously. "Some kind of special pills?" I've never seen an elephant become that calm so quickly. "I don't give them anything," I replied, "except the freedom to be themselves. And it's not obedience, it's trust." He shook his head in disbelief. "I don't believe it. Show me how you make him lie down." I walked over to the elephant, who was peacefully grazing nearby. Without saying a word, I gently touched his leg and looked into his eyes. Our connection was instant and silent. As the giant slowly lay down on the ground, I sat beside him and began softly singing an old Thai lullaby I remembered from my childhood. The rhythmic melody worked like magic. With each verse, his eyelids grew heavier. Soon his eyes closed completely, his breathing slowed and deepened, and from his trunk came a gentle snoring sound. My song had lulled this giant into a deep, peaceful sleep, right in front of amazed witnesses who had never seen anything like it. The old mahout was more shocked than anyone. "I don't understand," he whispered. "I used to beat them, yell at them, use hooks and chains, but they never obeyed me like this elephant obeys you." "That's because you tried to break their spirit with force," I explained gently. "But I just let them be who they were meant to be, free, intelligent, feeling beings." That moment was especially important to me because it showed that even those who had spent years inside the system of cruelty toward elephants could see a different way, if someone showed it to them. Today, our park is thriving. On its wide open grounds live dozens of rescued elephants of all ages, from babies born into freedom to elderly survivors of long, hard lives. They form their own family groups, choose who to spend time with, where and when to eat, when to bathe in the river. Visitors observe them with respect, without expecting performances or entertainment. They learn to appreciate elephants as they truly are, magnificent beings with deep emotions and complex social bonds. My life completely changed the day I stepped between a cruel mahout and a helpless baby elephant. I went from a little girl in a mountain village to a woman whose voice is heard around the world. But inside, I'm still the same Lek, small in size but not in determination to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Every morning, waking to the sounds of elephants rising, I think of Tong Kam, my first elephant friend. I remember the girl who watched her for hours, soaking in lessons of patience and wisdom. I remember the path that led me here, and every day I am thankful for the chance to see elephants return to their true nature, for the light that comes back into their eyes after years of dim existence in captivity. My philosophy is simple. I want animals to live in freedom, without fear, with dignity. And as long as there is even one suffering elephant in the world, my work is not finished. Today, as the name Lek Chaler is known in many countries, as tourists travel to Thailand just to visit Elephant Nature Park, I often think back to that moment so many years ago. The moment when a mahout raised a hook, and I stepped forward without thinking of the consequences. That moment of choice defined the rest of my life. If I could go back and change anything, I would change nothing. Because every scar healed on an elephant's body, every gaze where fear is replaced by trust, every joyful trumpet sound echoing across our valley, it is all worth every struggle and danger I have faced on this journey. I often say that elephants have taught me the most important lessons in life: patience, forgiveness, and unconditional love. Watching physically and emotionally broken animals begin to trust people again after months of care shows me the incredible power of kindness. We cannot change their past, but we can change their future. That phrase has become my life's motto. And every day, I do everything I can to make sure their future is filled only with safety, care, and the freedom to be who they are. Majestic elephants roaming freely over Thailand's green hills, as they have done for thousands of years before humans tried to control them. And you know what? When I see a former circus elephant take off his chains and walk wherever he wants for the first time, when I watch a motherless female adopt an orphaned calf, when I hear elephants communicate in their deep, rumbling language, I know that it was all worth it. Every tear, every breath of despair, every sleepless night. If my story teaches anything, it is this: one person, even someone small and seemingly powerless, can change the world if their heart holds enough love and determination. I am living proof of that. And so is every elephant we've saved in our park. My journey is not over. There is still so much work to do. Many elephants still need rescuing, and many old beliefs still need to be challenged. But now I no longer walk this path alone. I am joined by hundreds of volunteers from around the world, thousands of supporters who believe in the same dream, and of course, my elephants. Wise teachers who show me what it truly means to be human. People often call me the elephant whisperer. I smile when I hear these names, because the truth is, I'm not the one speaking to the elephants. They are the ones speaking to me. And if we humans learn to listen, They will tell us a story, one so ancient and wise it will change how we see the world and our place in it. Every time someone's eyes fill with tears when they see the free, happy elephants in our park, I know that one more person has heard that story, and it gives me hope. Hope for a world where animals live without fear of humans, and where humans learn to respect all living beings they share this planet with. So if you ever come to Thailand, take the time to visit Elephant Nature Park. Come not as a tourist expecting a show, but as a guest, ready to learn and to listen. And maybe, just maybe, you'll hear what I hear every day. The quiet but powerful voice of nature, reminding us who we are and who we were always meant to be.